Long before people feared the darkness itself, they feared the sound that came from the river. A woman crying, not softly, not like someone mourning beside a grave, but like someone whose pain had become something inhuman. People said that if you heard her voice far away, she was already close. And if you heard her close, it might already be too late. Her name was La Llorona, the weeping woman. And for generations, parents warned their children never to wander near the water after sunset, because somewhere beyond the reeds, she was still searching, still calling, still asking the same question. Where are my children? The legend begins in colonial Mexico, in a small village surrounded by dusty roads, open fields, and a river that seemed calm during the day. At night, it was different. The river became black. The trees leaned over the water like silent witnesses, and the people locked their doors before midnight. But before she became the woman in white, before her cries were carried across the valley, she was simply Maria. Maria was known throughout the village for her beauty. She had long black hair, warm dark eyes, and a quiet grace that made people turn their heads when she walked through the marketplace. But beauty did not protect her from loneliness. She wanted more than admiration. She wanted a home, a family, a life that felt safe. Then, one afternoon, a wealthy young rancher arrived in the village. He came riding on a dark horse, dressed in fine clothes, carrying himself like a man who had never been denied anything. When he saw Maria beside the village fountain, he stopped. For a moment, the noise of the market seemed to disappear. Their eyes met, and according to the legend, that was where everything began. He courted her with flowers, promises, and long walks beside the river. He told her they would build a life together. He said she would never be alone again. And Maria believed him. They married in a small stone church filled with candlelight. Soon they had 2 sons. For a while, Maria had everything she had prayed for: a husband, children, a home filled with laughter. She would sit outside in the afternoon while the boys played nearby, and sometimes she would look at them as though she could hardly believe they were hers. But happiness does not always disappear in a single moment. Sometimes it leaves slowly, so slowly that you barely notice it happening. Her husband began staying away from home. At first, it was only for a night, then several nights. He returned with excuses, but fewer smiles. When Maria asked where he had been, he avoided her eyes. The house became quiet. The warmth between them faded. And while Maria waited at the doorway with a candle in her hand, he spent more and more time away from her. Then came the day she saw the truth. A carriage entered the village square. Her husband stepped down from it. Beside him was another woman, a wealthy woman, elegant, confident, and when he looked at her, he smiled in a way he had not smiled at Maria for years. Maria stood beneath an archway and watched. She said nothing, but something inside her broke. That evening, she confronted him. At first, he denied nothing. He told her the marriage was over. He said he was leaving. Then he told her something worse. He intended to take the children with him. The boys were his heirs, he said. They belonged with him, not with her. Maria stared at the man she had once loved, the man who had promised she would never be alone. Now he was taking everything from her. He packed his belongings. He walked out, and the door closed behind him. The children came into the room and reached for their mother's hands, but Maria did not look down at them. She stood perfectly still, her face empty, her breathing shallow. Outside, the wind began to rise. The candles flickered, and somewhere beyond the house, the river continued to flow. Later that night, Maria woke the boys. She dressed them quietly. Then she took each child by the hand and led them out into the sleeping village. The boys were confused. They asked where they were going. Maria did not answer. The streets were empty. The moon disappeared behind dark clouds. Fog moved between the houses and followed them toward the water. By the time they reached the riverbank, a storm had begun. The wind pulled at Maria's dress. The children held on to each other. They were frightened now. They called her name, but grief had become rage, and rage had drowned everything else. What happened next is told differently, depending on where the story is heard, but every version ends in tragedy. Maria led her children into the river. The water rose around them. The boys cried out. And in one terrible moment, she let the current take them. Then came silence, a silence so deep that it broke through her anger. Maria looked into the dark water. She called their names.
Mis hijos,
there was no answer.
mis dulces niños.
Only the river,
¿Dónde
only the
están?
storm, only the
Perdónenme.
sudden, unbearable
Por
understanding
favor.
of what she had done. She threw herself into the water. She searched among the reeds. She clawed through mud and branches. She ran along the riverbank, screaming until her voice became raw. But her children were gone. Her red shawl floated away. Her lantern died. And before sunrise, Maria walked into the river one final time. The legend says that death did not free her. When her spirit tried to cross into the afterlife, she was asked where her children were. She had no answer, and so the gates remained closed. She was condemned to wander the earth until she found them. When Maria rose from the river again, she was no longer the woman the village remembered. Her skin had turned pale. Her dress hung from her body like wet burial cloth. Her hair covered most of her face. Black tears ran from eyes hollowed out by grief. And when she opened her mouth, the cry that came out was no longer human. Ay, mis hijos. Oh, my children. That night, villagers heard her walking through the streets. Wet footprints appeared on dry ground. Dogs hid beneath tables. Candles went out as she passed. Families held their children close and refused to open their doors. Some said she moved from house to house, peering through windows. Others claimed she stood at the foot of sleeping children's beds, mistaking them for the sons she had lost. But her curse was not finished. The story says she eventually found the man who had abandoned her. He was living in a grand hacienda with his new wife. Late one night, he heard crying outside. At first, the sound seemed distant. Then it moved closer. He walked toward the window, and in the courtyard below, a woman in white stood with her head lowered. Water dripped from her hair. Her dress was covered with mud. Slowly, she looked up. He recognized her, but the face staring back at him was no longer Maria's. The candles in the house went out one by one. The doors slammed shut. A trail of river water appeared across the floor, and somewhere inside the dark corridor, he heard her whisper his name. What happened to him is another part of the story that changes with every telling. Some say he disappeared before sunrise. Others say he was found beside the river, his face frozen in terror. And some say La Llorona spared him, because living with the fear was a crueler punishment. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. But the crying never stopped. Mothers warned their children not to play near the river after dark. Travelers hurried across bridges when the moon was high. Fishermen abandoned their boats when they heard a woman calling from the reeds. One story tells of two children who saw a beautiful woman standing across the water. She smiled at them. She opened her arms, and without understanding why, they began walking toward her. Their mother looked up just in time. She saw the woman's face change. Her smile disappeared. Her eyes became black. The mother ran into the water, grabbed both children, and pulled them back. La Llorona screamed so loudly that birds fled from the trees and the river itself seemed to shake. Even today, people still tell stories of seeing a woman in white along empty roads. Drivers say she appears suddenly in their headlights, standing motionless in the rain. Some stop, some keep driving, and some claim that when they look into the rear-view mirror, she is sitting in the back seat. Perhaps La Llorona is only a legend, a warning shaped by generations of fear. A story parents used to keep children away from dangerous rivers at night. Or perhaps her story survives because it touches something deeper, the fear of losing the people we love, the fear of making a mistake that can never be undone, the fear that grief can become something so powerful it refuses to die with us. So the next time you find yourself near a river after midnight and you hear a woman crying somewhere in the distance, do not call out. Do not follow the sound. And whatever you do, do not let her see your children, because she is still wandering, still searching, still weeping. And when her voice rises above the water, she asks the same question she has asked for centuries. Where are my children? But perhaps she is no longer looking for the ones she lost. Perhaps she is looking for yours.